Heljan's new Class 86 is unfortunately anything but electric. Let's take a look. Hey guys, welcome back to Proper Chuffed. My name's Heljan and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. That's half the fun of this, isn't it? If you're new and you enjoy this content, please consider subscribing. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back guys. It's good to see you again. Today's locomotive is a bit of a doozy. I'm just giving you a heads up in advance. I don't and I never will call these videos reviews because I don't feel like my final stamp on this is indicative of the larger range itself. So prime example, the Hornby Black 5, some people got absolute duds and mine ran absolutely flawlessly. And again, we have a situation like this where most people I've seen have had no issues with the Heljan Class 86. Mine, however, not so great. Now I'm going to put a pin in that because at this point, Heljan's Class 86 has received some very good reviews from Key Model World and the likes of YouTubers like Jenny Kirk. Mine, however, seems to be a little bit of a dud. And unfortunately, for the price that it's coming in at, I just don't think it's worth it, personally. Historically, I have been a big fan of Heljan locomotives. I've actually never been let down by one of them before, and in fact, their diesels usually are absolute stellar performers. But today's subject, something's gone wrong and we need to dissect it. So without further ado, let's take a look at Heljan's Class 86. So here is our Class 86. I think it's actually an 86-4. As usual, Heljan's presentation is absolutely fantastic. Always do love a blueprint design, and we've got that right on the front of the box. So this is looking good so far, but fair warning, it only gets worse from here, I'm afraid. Opening up the box, we're met with a little user manual, which gives us a brief history of the locomotive, as well as how to fit DCC, the various lights and functions here. And I like that Heljan always do color this completely. Here we've got a breakdown of the locomotive components and just a bit of warranty stuff here and information on the 86 itself. So here's our 86. Oh boy, okay. This is gonna be interesting. I don't like being particularly negative towards certain things, but this time around things are a little bit different. I've just been a little bit, not disappointed, maybe a little bit upset about this one. I'm actually very glad that I picked this up on sale and not full price, because at full price I would have been pretty livid, I'm sure, with what I get. Anyways, let's unbox it, unsleeve it from this plastic sheath. So first things first, and this is what I want to point out. This is the detail pack, okay? Bear in mind that I've already installed DCC into this locomotive. This here is exactly what you get. So this is the blanking plate that I've already installed. And that, my friends, that's the detail pack. Two NEM couplers, one which I've already fitted and had to absolutely cannibalize the locomotive to do so. And then this piece of, I guess, overhead wiring, and I'm actually not sure what those two tiny yellow things are, but that is the detail pack. There is no etched nameplate, given that this locomotive, Mons make, actually does have a beautiful name and should be on the side of the locomotive in more detail, but that's it. I think that's pretty poor, to be honest with you. You put that aside. So here's our 86, and inherently there's nothing particularly wrong with this. It's only once you start scrutinizing it and looking at it a little bit closer that you start to pick up a couple of problems. But without further ado, let's dive straight into it and take a look at the 86, the model itself, and get a little bit of history on this class. The British Rail Class 86 is an electric locomotive that played a vital role in the modernisation of Britain's railways during the 1960s. Part of British Rail's ambitious electrification efforts, the Class 86 became one of the most iconic and influential classes in British railway history, marking a shift from steam to electric power on key routes like the West Coast Main Line. The development of the Class 86 began in the early 1960s as BR modernised its network, particularly on intercity routes. It followed earlier electric locomotives such as Class 81 to 85 and formed the backbone of electric services for decades. The 86 was introduced between 1965 and 1966, with 100 units built at BR's Doncaster and Vulcan Foundry. Initially classified as the AL6, AC Locomotive 6, these locomotives were key to BR's West Coast Main Line electrification, serving the route from London to major cities like Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool and Glasgow. The 86 was designed to operate on 25 kilovolt AC overhead lines and was equipped with advanced control systems, allowing efficient performance under the newly electrified lines. It featured a Bobo wheel arrangement with 8 driving wheels to haul heavy freight and express passenger services. The locomotive had a power output of 3,600 horsepower and could reach speeds of 100 miles an hour or 160 kilometers an hour. This made it versatile for both express passenger services and heavy freight. Weighing around 84 tons, the 86 had the power and reliability needed to handle Britain's busiest intercity routes. When first introduced, the 86s were primarily used on express passenger services along the West Coast Main Line. They helped bridge the gap between traditional steam power and modern electric era, as well as diesel. The locomotive's speed and power made it ideal for fast, long-distance routes connecting London Euston with key cities in the north and west of Britain. Over time, the 86s evolved with subclasses adapted to meet specific service needs. For example, the 86-2 was fitted with improved suspension to handle higher speeds and was reserved for passenger duties, while the 86-1 was adapted for freight with a reduced maximum speed of 80 miles an hour to handle heavier loads. By the 70s and 80s, Class 86s were a common sight, not just on the West Coast Main Line, but also on other electrified routes such as the Great Eastern Main Line in the east of England. The locomotive's versatility meant it could perform a wide range of duties, from high-speed intercity trains to heavy freight, ensuring its place as a workhorse of the British railway network. Several variants of the 86 were introduced to meet the evolving demands of British Rail. The 86-0, original spec, most of these units were later converted into other subclasses. The 86-1 modified for freight operations with a top speed reduced to 80 miles an hour to accommodate those heavy loads. The 86-2s designed for passenger services with improved suspension and a top speed of 100 miles an hour for faster, smoother rides. And the 86-3, a freight variant with some traction motors removed to low maintenance costs, resulting in reduced power output and top speed. By the 90s, the 86 began to be phased out of frontline passenger services, replaced by newer electric locomotives like the 87 and advanced Class 90s. The privatization of British Rail in the 1990s also led to changes, with many 86s being sold to freight operators like Freightliner. These operators continued to use the 86s well into the 2000s, particularly for intermodal container trains. However, as newer models entered service, the 86s saw reduced use, with many units being either scrapped or stored. Despite the decline, several 86s have been preserved, with some still in operation on heritage railways or special charter services. Their robust design, adaptability, and significance in British Railways history have cemented their place in the heart of many railway enthusiasts. So here we are with Heljan's Class 86, a model I'm going to come out of the gates very quickly and say is a fair bit overpriced. First things first, I find the lack of content in the included detail pack quite staggering. For £240, I'm alarmed that we do not at least have etched nameplates in here. As you can see, most of the pipework and electrics have been added to the model from the factory, which I'm sure won't be a problem later, right? Let's begin at the front end of the engine. There's a decent amount of detail here, and the livery application is fairly crisp, although there is some noticeable bleed from the silver onto the yellow cab end. Some messier paintwork on the buffer beam has left a noticeable yellow splodge on the black beam, and it feels in general that the yellow application was a bit heavy on the front, with rivets and finer details becoming a little lost as a result. On a positive note, the windscreen wipers are wonderfully to scale. The glazing on the windows is okay, and a few small gaps are visible between the glass and the plastic if you look quite closely. The cab detail itself is another bit of a letdown. Unfortunately, the detail inside is rudimentary and fairly basic, and when I compare it to Bachmann or a Curascale, this is left wanting. I'm not joking when I initially thought this was an exposed chipboard, and only on closer inspection did I realize that what I was looking at was the intent of detail. Moving on, there are a few separately fitted parts, including applied handrails. The buffers are sprung, but really, who cares? The bogies are fortunately quite detailed and feature some really impressive rivet work, which extends to the wheels. Just above the bogies, a trio of what I can only call springs are present, but sadly are only half detailed, with the hidden side flush against the shape of the body. Along the rest of the body, intricate underframe detailing is present. Be careful with this, as some of these parts are separately applied though, and I found one or two a little bit dainty when handling. Moving up to the top of the 86, we get a good look at the electrical work here. The pantograph is a lovely, robust piece of kit, and it locks in nicely to reduce the risk of damage. There are quite a few separately applied wires and cables here that do a good job of bringing this to life, and overall, this is probably one of the areas of this model that I'm most fond of. The livery application in general is fairly sharp, in particular the banding on the roof, as well as the various hazard warnings and Caledonian Sleeper stag being crisp and accurate. Heljan's tamper printing is clean and sharp, making the model visually appealing from any angle. Under a bit of light, however, you can see a very rough paint application to this model with some notable thicker streaks. Now this may be down to the plastic or the paint, I'm not sure, but frankly it looks pretty awful under this light and it's rather disappointing. This model is DCC ready with a 21-pin interface, which makes it easy to upgrade to DCC sound. There is LED lighting present on the cab ends, which are independently switchable, though for the life of me I cannot understand how a model at this price does not have a cab light. Perhaps the intention behind its omission being that Heljan simply did not want to highlight that chipboard. Cab detail. With a retail price in the range of £240, the Heljan Class 86 is considered a premium model, and if I'm honest, I just don't feel like what I've seen here so far matches that description. A distinct lack of detail, some questionable paintwork, and a few nagging issues visually have me wondering. I've had some pretty brilliant modules from Heljan in the past, and this is definitely a bit steep in my opinion. However, let's head down to the track and see how she performs before we make any final conclusions. So here we are on track with our 86, and I have not run this one in yet. I have fitted the DCC decoder, but this really is our first test, so I'm looking forward to seeing just how she performs. Now, interestingly enough, you've got lights on the front and back of the cabs, but no cab light, and I think that's a major misstep on Heljan's part. They do historically put lights in the cabs, so I'm surprised to see that it's not included here. But let's put her under power and see how she performs. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm literally at speed step 1 here, and as you can see, it's rather fast for a crawl. Not exactly what I was hoping for. I was hoping for something a little bit more smooth. There seems to be a slight bit of juddering too. I'm going to run it backwards and forwards here just to see if that improves at all. But I'm going to run it in obviously and see if that makes an improvement overall. But I'm not super happy with that as a crawl. It's rather fast. It's more like a slight jog. However, I need to do my due diligence, so we're going to run it around and run it in for the next 30 minutes, both backwards and forwards, and see how we improve. Right, now running in complete, and as you can see, there is a little bit of juddering with this locomotive, and I'm just wondering what that could be. If you look closely at the chain link coupling, you'll see it moving backwards and forwards, and it's hard to sort of capture this exactly on video, but there does seem to be a bit of stuttering with this locomotive. While it may not be super noticeable on camera, it's definitely an audible thing, and if I just shut up for a second, you might be able to hear it too. I have checked the gauging on the wheels and it does seem to be absolutely fine, so it's certainly not that. It may also be the decoder, but having swapped out for a different decoder, the problem persists. So my suspicion is that it may be something to do with the pickups, or rather unfortunately, something to do with the actual motor itself. Now, I know there have been a couple of reviews on this locomotive and most of them seem to be stellar in terms of its running. So it may just be me with this little lemon here, but I'm not super impressed with how it's running. Even after running it in, the problem persists, and that is quite frustrating to see. I may need to do some deeper digging here and see if I can resolve this, but that's a video for another day. I will say the motor is fairly quiet. There doesn't seem to be too much of a problem with that itself, but that juddering is really frustrating me and it's quite visible to me. Hopefully you guys can see it too. Not super happy with that. Okay, so I've done a fair bit of running here. I think it's time to couple this 86 to my new Hornby Mark II Caledonian Sleeper coaches, which I picked up from Rails of Sheffield. They were on sale and I couldn't resist the opportunity. Ideally, in a perfect world, I would have loved to have got my hands on the Mark IVs from Scale on the Caledonian livery, but they seem to be sold out everywhere and the secondhand prices on eBay are stupid. So I'll hopefully wait for a second run of those. But coupling is going to be a slight problem, as you can see. Because all the detail parts are fitted and there are no NEM couplers attached to this locomotive straight out the box, we need to attach it. But the NEM coupler will not attach correctly and will probably cause some derailment while these wires are all in the way. Now, I've tried my best to pull these off individually and see if they would just, slide out, but it seems that they're glued in place, which is a major problem because it means that I now have to actually trim back with a pair of scissors these wires and brake pipes, which is super unfortunate because I'm actually damaging the model and they've not given me spares for that. So if I wanted to replace them later, I can't do that, and that's super sad.
but needs must, and I unfortunately have to trim these back. Maybe I'm making a huge mistake here and I've missed something important, but from what I can see in the notebook provided with the locomotive, there's no way of replacing these, so I'd have to actually buy a second set if need be. So with the pipework removed, I can actually couple up to the train itself and we can get running. And don't get me wrong, these look absolutely outstanding running behind this 86. But the juddering issue persists, and unfortunately that kind of sours the entire experience for me a little bit. If you guys have some thoughts as to what could be causing this, please do let me know, and I'll happily revisit this at a later date and see what can be done about it. The unfortunate thing for me is that, if there is actually a fundamental problem with this locomotive, returning it is a very expensive thing. So the reality is I'm stuck with it and I can see if I can fix it, but if not, this is what we have and this is what we're dealing with. In a perfect world, I'd love to have an Acura Scale 92 pulling a rake of Mark IV carriages from them too, but maybe I'll just have to hold out and hope that they do reruns of both of those. Regardless, it's quite a sight on my line and I'm looking forward to running the 86 on the main line. Whether or not I put up some catenary for it, remains to be seen. I'm not entirely sure that that's something that I want to commit to. I only have one electric locomotive, which is this so far, but if I do get a 92 down the line, perhaps it's something I should consider for Dun Roman.
These things happen. Sometimes you get absolute duds and it just is the way it is. There's nothing I can do about it really, other than probably investigate further. As I suggested, you guys, give me an idea of what you think might be the problem and I'll happily take a look at it. But for £240, I feel like this is a ridiculously expensive locomotive for what you get. So I'm very glad I picked it up on sale with Rails of Sheffield for £120. That seems much more reasonable for a locomotive of this level of detail and that quality of running. But you guys let me know what you think about this. I'm not upset about this per se, but I am a little bit disappointed. But this is what happens with the world of model railways. Every now and then you do get a dud and it just is what it is. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time, I hope you keep your engines fired and stay on track. All the best.